Hello, everyone, and welcome to this special segment with the Director of HMCI, Ms. Danielle Coleman. She's here to tell us all about what's happening with HMCI and the NEOC as well during this coronavirus crisis. So, Danny, thank you, of course, for being here.
It's great to be here, Donna. Thank you so much for inviting us to talk about the NEOC.
Yeah. So, but let's begin by telling our viewers a little bit, or giving us an overview of HMCI's perspective at this point.
Of the actual operations. I mean, again,
yes.
It's been a really busy year for hazard management and, of course, the whole NEOC at this stage. We started early on with the earthquake and then, of course, the tsunami scare, and then we had the fire and COVID. And hazard management's been working very closely with the health sector for, I guess, since January, February on COVID-19. Obviously, we activated the National Emergency Operations Centre and all the bodies, policy and executive, on the 3rd of March. So that's been in full swing since the 3rd of March. Of course, that's, I guess, it's about 6 weeks, 7 weeks ago now. I've lost concept of time. But, you know, it's kind of morphed into a very smooth, well-oiled machine. And when you're talking about up to about 75 to 100 people involved in that NEOC, that's a lot of moving parts, but it seems to be very, very smooth at the stage. And again, everyone seems to understand their responsibilities and their roles and getting on with the work, and everyone's carrying their own, the weight. So it's a really good working, well-oiled machine. We're really happy with how it's going.
Give us a little bit of a breakdown for those who may not know out there of the NEOC and how frequently it meets.
Okay. So the NEOC itself, it's, well, you have the executive, and obviously that's cabinet and the governor and the premier and so forth, AG. Then you have what we call the policy group, and that's chaired by the deputy governor, and it has all the chief officers in. It has a number of sort of deputies of the deputy commissioner, for example, police, hazard management, a number of other entities. And then you have the National Emergency Operations Centre, and that's called the NEOC or the NEOC. You've heard it probably termed as. That's basically broken down into 4 different clusters. So we have the Human Concerns Cluster, we have the Emergency Response Cluster, we have Infrastructure, and we have Support Services. And each one of those, altogether, we have 17 emergency support teams. So that in itself, I mean, there's a lot of different moving parts. For example, I mean, we have things like under infrastructure, we have utilities. So we have water authority, we have CUC, we have home gas. In emergency response, we deal with security, we deal with, fire service and so forth. That's all under there. Under human concerns, we have things like mass fatalities. I mean, God, we really don't want to get to that stage, but we have to consider what that might look like if by chance we need it. We also have shelter operations and a number of different ESTs there. But in support services, we have things like resource support. We need resources. We need to order PPE right now, for example. We need to order things for our medical facilities. We also have, economic continuity. It's really important that we're balancing not just what we're doing on a day-to-day emergency basis, but how do we morph into that recovery phase. So economic continuity obviously helps. Again, that's private-public partnership. That's Chamber of Commerce, led by Mr. Will Pinot. And it's making sure that we are balancing there. So again, economic continuity. And again, they meet every single day. At 9 o'clock every morning, we meet as the NEOC. They go into their cluster group after at 10 o'clock in their own individual clusters. And then at 12 o'clock, we have this, what we call a situational report coming in. And that's all the details for each cluster in a written document. 2 o'clock, obviously, we have the press conference. 3 o'clock, we have the policy group meeting. So that whole drum roll has been going on since the 3rd of March. And again, it's a well-oiled machine at this point. But going back to the situational reports, I mean, it's very important to be having these meetings, but of course, they have to be reported for information management point of view. So we can look back in a year's time or 6 months' time when we do the debrief and say, what did we learn from this? We have everything documented for transparency purposes as well. So it's just a really good way to make sure that we're being accountable for what we're saying we're doing, but also having a record of how we can improve in future.
So June 1st is quickly approaching, the hurricane season, and in the midst of all this, of the coronavirus crisis, obviously people are very concerned about hurricane season. What kind of planning is still going on besides what you're currently dealing with?
Yeah, at the end of the day, we have 8% shelter capacity in the Cayman Islands, Grand Cayman for persons sheltering. So that's always been a low number. We've always been striving to increase that to about 30%. The sister islands are much better. They have, I think, Cayman Brac has about 50%, and Little Cayman has about 100%. So we've always been striving to increase the shelter capacity. But of course, now being social distancing, we have to really consider how do we make that 8% increase. So we have to double, perhaps triple our shelters right now. So we're working very closely with Public Works and the medical teams. to make sure that, of course, we're expanding those shelters. We're looking at private companies, private businesses, buildings, but also how do we make sure that we can, deal with COVID as well as shelters in one capacity. So we're looking at inventory. How much inventory stock do we have? We order every year, but of course this year we may need to order more in case there is any stops. So we're also really happy that the military are coming in from the UK because they're going to help us a lot with the logistics. So it's all moving in that direction, but we have to be very cognizant this year that the shelter capacity is going to look very different than it has done in the past.
Okay. Speaking of the military, they obviously have come from the UK and assist all of the overseas territories. What has the relationship or correspondence been like with the overseas territories during coronavirus?
It's been interesting. I mean, for years and years, we've been working with the Ministry of Defence every year when it comes to hurricane season and the FCO. And that's all about making sure that, we can do critical infrastructure data. So if by chance we need the Mounts Bay in the past, we've worked with them for many months before hurricane season to make sure they have our maps, they know exactly what our plans are. And that's been going on again for years and years now. The Overseas Territory, I had a very interesting meeting yesterday with the Overseas Territory disaster management officers, and it became really apparent that the way we're dealing with this is quite different. Everyone's different, everyone's done it in their own way. And because it is such uncharted territory, of course, there's no blueprint for this. We're learning as we go. But I think, right. Montserrat, again, they're having a complete lockdown for the next 8 to 10 days. Bermuda are focusing more on getting the economy back up and running. Anguilla, it's been much more of a health sector run as opposed to the whole NEOC. So we're all doing it differently, but again, it's just really good to learn from each other and have those experiences and just share a bit of banter as well, because I think everyone needs a bit of a communication and focusing on the goods, the bads, and the uglies at this time. So it's been good. Right. We're also actually involved. We've been holding the SEDEMA meetings. We've been attending every week. So again, obviously we're becoming members of SEDEMA. And so we're learning again what our other regional partners are doing or not doing, and it's been really interesting.
You mentioned learning from each other. Are there any particular models that you found that your colleagues in the overseas territories might be following from other overseas territories?
Not so much. Again, I think so much of this is so tailored towards your own individual territory or your country. And we're trying to pick up the snippets from each. And again, Dr. John Lee's been doing an excellent job. I think he spends every waking hour outside of this building researching best practices, as are numerous others. I think we've all had our heads in the books. And I think after this, I can't wait to not read about supply chains or logistics or whatever it is. So I think it's taking the best practices from each and saying how do we make put these together and make Cayman's approach as robust and effective as possible.
Okay. So tell us about some of the activities thus far that the NEOC has been being a part of or going through.
Yeah, and again, as I say, it's a health emergency. So we're here for logistics. We're here for, we set up 4 isolation facilities now for incoming passengers. So there's a lot of logistics, obviously, that goes around that, both incoming passengers and outgoing passengers. We work very closely with the Governor's office. They've been the lead on sort of the evacuation flights, but of course, NEOC support them in a lot of that. The medical facility we're standing up very soon. Now, we hope we don't have to use it, but again, this is so unprecedented that we want to make sure we're ready for everything. I think all the decisions Cayman's made to date have been very proactive. So we want to step up this medical facility and have, I think it's up to about 80, 90 beds at this stage in case we need it. So there's a lot of logistics there, obviously. Meals, making everyone provide, I think we've provided over 8,000 meals for these isolation facilities. And again, that's about 300 people we've been looking after in these facilities. The testing, obviously, that's mainly led by health, but there's a lot of logistics that go behind that to make sure that things are in place when they need to be. Transportation, there's a whole lot of things that are actually happening in the background. Working with schools, it's a very interesting. Every day is very, very different. One of the things we're doing right now is trying to work with the private sector as well as the public sector to get the evacuation flights out for patients that need it. A lot of patients here might have cancer or other chronic illnesses that they need help and they need to go overseas for treatment. So we're trying to get that organised right now as well. So again, every day is a completely different day. It's a really interesting, dynamic, atmosphere right now. So yeah. You
talked a few points. You made a few points about training, about learning. Tell us about training that's been ongoing during this time.
So there's a lot of training. I mean, every year we work very closely with our friends from Portfolio of Civil Service, Ms. Gloria McField-Nixon, who you'll be hearing from later on today. There's a lot of training for continuity of operations. So every hurricane season, before hurricane season, we do training for the whole of government and some private sector as well on how to develop a continuity of operations plan. So we did that early, I guess it was March, April, again losing time. But also mass casualty. When this all kind of kicked off in March the 3rd, we were right in the middle of a mass casualty training. And that's, again, multi-agency. I think there were about 45 people who attended that. It's a 5-day course with a simulation at the end. We're currently also doing the hurricane exercise. Now, we are going to do that hurricane exercise this year. Whilst we're balancing things, we're activated anyway as the NEOC. So what we'll be doing will be implanting scenarios to make every member think, how do we change it up this year? How do we make sure that what we're dealing with from a logistical point of view or from medical or from security point of view, how do we keep in mind both the hurricane as well as the COVID? So that will be happening, I think, in June. And we're sharing those scenarios as well with our overseas territories, so we can all, again, work together and share best practice and not recreate the wheel. Yeah.
So as we move forward, what are some of the next steps? What are some of the things that are planned going forward?
It's those kind of things. We're making sure that we can look to see how does the NEAC morph again into the recovery phase? How do we get out of this sort of response phase to deal with, businesses coming up online again? Do we see another spike in cases potentially? We've talked about flattening the curve, and we've done, a very good job, I think, from a government perspective at flattening this curve. But when you start opening things up, the chances are things will spike. We all know that. We've seen that in different countries. So how do we deal with that? How do we make sure that the economy continues to flow or starts flowing, but we're not putting people's lives at risk? And I think we're very, very lucky to be living in a country where lives are at the forefront here, and they have to be because of we are Cayman kind. Every life is absolutely critical, and I'm really, really happy that we as government are actually putting that as a priority over anything else. It's really makes me feel very proud to be Caymanian.
As we wrap up, let's talk a little bit about the teams that you've had to work with and the kind of work, how they've all stepped up to the plate, some going above and beyond. Talk a little bit about that.
Okay, I mean, when you talk about the NEOC, it's, usually you're in a room together for like either an exercise or a short hurricane span of 4 days. And, you're all bustled up. It's like usually 75 people in the room together. It's a very loud environment. It's a very engaging environment. But it's usually only about 4 or 5 days. So, of course, now we're talking about 40 people on Zoom, if not more, zooming into the NEOC every day. There's about 6 of us actually in the building, in the office at the NEOC. So it's a very different dynamics, and it's quite interesting. We've shifted from this, face-to-face conversations to this, let's talk to a screen, but it's incredible. I mean, again, I'm so impressed with how it's been sustained, because it's 6-7 weeks now. It's a very long time to be operating as an NEOC. We know we've got a lot longer ahead of us, but everyone is really pulling their weight, and it's really refreshing to see that everyone's taking responsibility with full force and really, stepping up for Cayman and I get quite emotional about this. Stepping up for Cayman and just being really playing their part to make sure Cayman is safe. And again, the same with the public. I mean, it's incredible to see that the public have really taken this on board and staying at home and doing their bit to be Cayman kind, to make sure they're protecting the most vulnerable here. And also, charities setting up, we've seen so many great things, great stories happening. The food we have at the NEOC supports charities. It's those kind of things, giving back to the community to make sure that those who are the most vulnerable are well cared for at this time. But again, sustaining an NEOC for 6 weeks and then probably another couple of months is difficult. But again, everyone's really played their part. So massive kudos to everyone. And again, the whole thing, I mean, going from the top with our leadership, Premier and Governor and Minister, all the way down to us lot, it's been a really good working environment.
Okay, any final words?
No, I guess stay home, Cayman. Please do your part. We're really excited to see, the way that Cayman's moving forward. We're very confident that we've got a hold of this. But again, things can change dramatically overnight, and we're really hoping that everyone plays their part and just does their thing to be Cayman kind. Pay it forward. If someone does something nice for you, please pay it forward. And let's make sure we're all in this together at the end of the day. So let's make sure we're doing our bit. So please stay home, Cayman.
All right, Danny, thank you so much for bringing the public up to date on exactly what is happening with the NEOC and how that work behind the scenes actually transcends to how things are happening in the public and the decisions that are being made. All right, so thank you.
Thank you, Donna.
And thank you for joining us as well.